What do you think the biggest mistake is people are making, whether it's individuals or companies, on their LinkedIn?
I mean, so many people will sell to me on LinkedIn. And the first thing I do is I look at their LinkedIn profile and go, oh, that sucks. And then I move on. If your LinkedIn profile isn't optimized, if the last time you wrote content was 6 months ago, if your last recommendation was in 2019, 2020, which a lot of people's are, why would I do business with you? LinkedIn lead generation agencies are the worst, and social selling companies are not far behind. They really suck at sales.
And now the man you've been waiting for, John, the sales machine, Rankins.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's guest is one of the most sought after sales trainers today. He's a top voice on LinkedIn, a TEDx speaker, and was awarded as one of the top Salesforce influencers 3 times in a row. After 23 years in London working in sales, he wanted to raise the standards of sales from what he's seen. So he set up his own training business and wrote Everybody Works in Sales, which became an international bestseller. He's delivered LinkedIn and sales training to over 500 small businesses, startups, and solopreneurs. Please welcome Niraj Kapur.
Thank you so much. And with that commercial husky voice of yours, it sounds even better.
Right on, because I'm waking up in Manila this morning at 4:50 to jump on here to make sure that I'm delivering the knowledge from the people who don't have it, or small businesses or businesses, to people who need it from people like you, Niraj.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. It's currently 10 p.m. in Ireland, so it's not as early as yours, but I'm normally in bed by now. But again, you want to serve more people, so you just put in the extra hour to help people. So thank you so much for getting up so early for this.
Yeah, I love it. I got one right after this too. So I want to jump right in. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that everybody's in sales. Before, people used to say, John, you're a great salesperson. And it used to bother me because there was this stigma about salespeople, right? And even my family would say, wow, you're just, everything's easy for you because you're so good at sales. And I'm like, you have no idea how many doors I've knocked on, how many times I've gotten reamed out, people attacking me, how many times I've shifted my products and services throughout a 30-year career. It's a never ending evolutionary game in sales. But for me, the words that ring truer were never truer than what Zig Ziglar said, which is, sales is service. And I love helping people. I coined the phrase, when in service, never nervous. And it's all about solving people's problems, being curious, having curiosity, like a little boy putting together a puzzle, and finally making sure that they're satisfied. So you get it. You wrote about it. Everybody's in sales. Can you tell me how that came about? And we're not going to go into backstory because I want to talk about the badass things you're doing right now. But can you tell me how that came about?
That came about from having a brilliant editor because I wanted to write a sales book. And I thought, what can I possibly do that's better than Mark Hunter, Jeffrey Gitomer, Jeb Blount, Anthony Iannarino, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy? And of course, the answer is nothing. There's nothing I can do. Nothing. No matter how hard I try, I will never be as good as them. So I do know that to stand out, which is very important, you have to tell stories. So I talked about what it was like starting off in 1994, no internet, no mobile, no computer at my desk. We had these A5 cards you had to flip through, and they were so badly handwritten. It's like, oh God, that was a CRM in those days. It was terrible. And I talked about my life in sales, and people were surprised how much of it was full of rejection and setbacks before eventually age 39, after almost 17 years, I found success. That's a very long time. So there's a lot of failure in my life. And I think that's why people like the book, because most sales books show off, brag, I earned this, look at me, look what I'm achieving. Whereas mine was more about the struggle. and the difficulty before I found success. And it was called My Life in Sales. And my editor goes, your title sucks. Call it Everybody Works in Sales. And I went, this is why I'm paying you the money.
Well, yeah, and it's a great title. We stand on the shoulder of giants, right?
Yeah.
I had Jeffrey Gitomer on the podcast. He's a total badass, right? Little Red Book of Sales. I just had Keenan on the podcast.
Oh, Keenan's a good guy. I've spoken to him a few times. Yeah.
Gap selling. Yeah, and I'm a fan, dude. It's all about methodologies and evolution, right? And I really want to take it to the next level and get into the evolution because you started out, like you said, going through a Rolodex or all these 3x5 cards. Basically, they're an address book. And, I created the sales machine because I know that address books don't help people. And even those modern day ones called CRMs, bullshit, right? They don't drive performance. They don't have rewards, recognition, competition, compensation. They do not connect the dots of having a conversation, right? And sales is all about a conversation. And I spoke at Harasses. It's like the World Economic Conference in Asia. Like you, right? I'm a life learner. And there was a phrase going around. It was O2O. Have you heard of O2O?
No.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I didn't get the memo either. Online to offline and offline to online is what they were talking about. Ericsson, and you have Gallup, you have all these different Gartner, big organizations. But the buzzword was O2O, online to offline and offline to online. And the people that can connect the dots and do it in an old school way are going to be the people that win the future. Not AI, but the people who can, demo their products offline and bring them online. Yep. Or promote them online and allow you to conveniently, easily get them offline. As an example, let's talk about that. What's your take on that and the old school ways that you see that are now working better than ever before?
I find it fascinating, the old school ways. I would say certain old school ways are working so much more effective in 2024 and beyond in a world that's driven by technology and AI, because so many people are bombarded with so much technology, staring at their screen all day. They are craving a human connection by the time lunch is finished, because all morning they're on Teams or Zoom, they have meeting after meeting, they're staring at the screen, they have lunch, they stare at their phone, and by 2:00 they're tired. And 2:00 is when I make my cold calls every day, and I call people because that's for me is prime. I've tested different times of the day. First thing in the morning doesn't work for me. 5:00, 4:30 doesn't really work for me. But I'll tell you what, 2:00 to 3:00 is gold, and it's been like that for 6 months for me because people are craving a human connection. And whenever I can't get hold of people on the phone, because you can't always get hold of people, I do the second great thing, this old school. I write letters. I don't handwrite them because my writing sucks, but I type them up, print them off, sign it with a beautiful pen. To those of you listening, I love stationery, good quality pens. Put it in a quality envelope, and I write a letter to somebody. And the amount of people who literally will pick up the phone and call me and go, wow, I've not had a letter for 3 or 4 years is incredible. And yet most people won't do it, John, because it takes time. And we live in a world of quick fixes. And I keep saying, look, forget about the quick fixes. Focus on the long term. You will do so much better in sales.
Because of the personalization, right? And at the end of the day, you got to stand out, right? I just had on the show a guy who drove up who drove all of G2's growth. But bottom line is, I had Adam Goyette, who's a badass and just started his own marketing company. He grew up in Philly, but he now lives in the UK. And what he did differently at G2 is they created these huge certificates of certification and recognition from G2 in these huge frames, right? So instead of sending out a business card, instead of even a flash card or a flyer, they sent out these glass frames. And so everybody, right? And before they actually approached clients, right? So they were giving the recognition before. They're giving these huge frames. And then when the salesperson calls up, everybody takes the call. Hey, thanks. I got the frame. Thanks for recognizing our company. Thanks for recognizing me at the company. And it's amazing how when you can give first, and the Bible says this, give and you shall receive. I'm not going to get religious on you and break out with a sermon, but it's so true, right? What are you doing to refine those letters and or to be a badass because you've trained and worked with over 500 companies, right? So how do you take that to the next level, connect the dot, and get in there to do the training for them and scale their business?
Whenever I work with people, quite often they'll say to me, Niraj, some of your competitors have been contacting me. And I always say, would you mind if you just show me the email or the LinkedIn DM they sent you? And John, every single time, hi, I'm an award-winning trainer. And then they talk about themselves for 5 minutes. And here's my Calendly link. Let's book a meeting. Without exception, every LinkedIn trainer, every sales trainer, they're like robots. They all sound the same. And I've really, in the last 2 years, built my business and made profit by doing the opposite of what all my competition do. So my competition don't write books. I've written 3 books. My competition don't do TED Talks. I give TED Talks. LinkedIn trainers, most of them are terrible at sales, so I make sure I can sell. Most sales trainers can't teach anything except sales. I teach LinkedIn. I'm constantly upskilling and trying to do things different to my competition. So when I write a letter or an email or a LinkedIn DM to somebody, I go straight in with a value to them. I don't even talk about myself. I don't mention any accomplishment because they don't care. And it's not important. All that matters is them. And by value, what do you mean by value? So value can be something as simple as, I read about this in your website. And from my experience of working in your industry, here's what I have seen, which makes them go, oh, that's interesting. Or if I'm offering LinkedIn training, I'll say something like, 95% of people on LinkedIn are just observers. 3% like and comment and post. 2% post content, and they're the ones who make the money. I like to show you how to become part of that 2%. That is a fascinating introduction because you're giving a really valuable fact and you're helping people make money. But I haven't said, here's my Calendly link. Here, I'm a LinkedIn top voice. I've worked for 30 years. They don't care. They just want, you have to get their attention at the very beginning. And you always do that by sharing useful information. Yeah, really sharing useful information and sharing insight with them.
I like it. You just gave me an idea. It's brilliant, right? Because essentially you said that most people on LinkedIn are just observers. And then you got cheerleaders. And then you got the players. The players are the ones that drive stuff. In order to drive, right, results, what do you think based on what you know about the industry, 500 different companies, and do you focus on a specific industry or are you?
I don't. I made a very deliberate choice. When I started out, everybody said you need to specialize in hotels or cars or IT. And I'm like, why? I didn't understand why I had to do that. And I'm so glad I didn't. So if you look at the clients I'm working with right now, with the exception of Salesforce, which I posted yesterday actually on LinkedIn, it took me 3 years, for everybody listening, 3 years it took me to win Salesforce. Just so you know. Worth every penny, but it took me 3 years. With that exception, most of the companies I work with is one-to-one coaching, or it's training of 10 people or less, most companies. And whenever I work with them, it's an incredible experience. It really and truly is. But they all want to generate more sales. But whenever I look at their outreach or I observe their demos, John, in almost every case, they can't open deals. They have no opening statement. They talk too much. They never pause. They struggle with listening and they ask generic questions. Again, no matter what industry, almost every single person is exactly the same, which I find stunning. And I always like to ask them, what books have you read recently or what podcasts do you listen to? And again, majority have not read a book and they may have listened to a podcast once 6 months ago but forgotten about it. And that just tells you the state of the sales industry, the fact that people are just not upskilling. Because upskilling is one of the best advantages you will ever have. In fact, upskilling and taking action are one of the best things you can ever do in this industry.
I see it a lot also. And even I'm like in the marketing game guilty of it. And, I read a lot and I study a lot and I go to a lot of seminars and I watch a lot of training and I have my own sales force and I train them and we're constantly upskilling. It's the mindset, the skill set, and even the heart set for me. I really believe in sales is helping people. But what I discovered is, even for my marketing team, hiring outside marketers and digital marketing agencies, high level individuals, they don't get it. The truth is they don't get it. Like when you really look at the ability to create results is what you said. It's not about being a cheerleader. It's not about liking, because there's a big difference between acknowledgement and engagement. And if you're not creating engagement, you're just a fan or a cheerleader. And or if people liked your post and you just liked it back, or they commented and you said, thank you, amateur hour.
Yeah.
And you just, all that effort is in the garbage can, because unless you interact and communicate and engage, there's no relationship built. None. So I'm like, great, we got 1,000 likes. Who cares? Doesn't mean shit. Like, what did they like about what we posted? What value did they get? Why not ask those questions? They liked it. What else would they like to know? What else would they like to learn? So I love the way you're doing it and how you're doing it, Niraj. So what do you think the biggest mistake is people are making, whether it's individuals or companies, on their LinkedIn? And I could talk for fucking a long time, but I don't want to.
I mean, so many people will sell to me on LinkedIn. And the first thing I do is I look at their LinkedIn profile and go, oh, that sucks. Then I move on. If your LinkedIn profile isn't optimized, if the last time you wrote content was 6 months ago, if your last recommendation was in 2019, 2020, which a lot of people's are, why would I do business with you? LinkedIn lead generation agencies are the worst, and social selling companies are not far behind. They really suck at sales. And they saw some guy speak 4 or 5 years ago, copied him, some American guru, and they just copied what he said, and they didn't realize, nope, that's just not relevant. I had somebody yesterday trying to sell to me in dollars. Dollars this, dollars that. I'm like, I'm based in Ireland. Why are you quoting me dollars for? Again, it just showed no knowledge. I would never try to pitch an American company and go, okay, this will cost you 10,000 euros. I would never say that. But yet people don't have, they just copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. Because when people don't know what they're doing, John, they often default to bad habits or often default to stupidity instead of finding out, who can I ask advice from? Who can I hire as a coach to help me get better? This is my 30th year in sales. And I have a sales coach who I work with once a month, who I practice pitches with so I can stay sharp. My 30th year. And I still do it. And if I'm still doing it after 30 years, you have no excuse for not doing it in your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or 10th year.
Yeah, one of the guys, Tim Grover.
Oh, yes.
He's Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's coach, right? And he's like, so many people are chasing greatness and they haven't even done whatever the fuck they need to do just to be good.
Yeah, Relentless and Winning are two amazing books everybody should be reading,
He's really the real deal, So for me, success is every day, every day, every day. Like, it's not about some days, not about one day. And it definitely is not about yesterday. Nobody cares what you did yesterday. That's the first thing I do when I train new people. I just go to the straight of the room, and it used to be, a whiteboard. Now it's an interactive TV. And I just write, nobody cares, because it's not about you. It's about what results have you created for others.
I see this a lot with salespeople, especially over the age of 45, men, who keep talking about the past glories from 10, 15 years ago, and they offer nothing new at all in the workplace, which is why so many of them are becoming irrelevant, and which is why so many businesses are hiring young people these days, because they can be more easily molded. And I wish that more people for 45 would just have more self-awareness and stop talking about the past. That's a really good point you brought up there, because I see it all the time.
Do you have a framework that you actually implement when you go into these companies, and what does it look like?
I deliberately don't have a framework because, again, all my competition does, and I don't want to be like them. So what I do is a bit different. When I go into companies, I work out what the problem is. The training is interactive. Now, most sales trainers I've seen deliver slide heavy training, which doesn't work. If you have people just nodding their heads for a few hours, you're doing a disservice to them. So my training is interactive. A lot of the time you're flip charts, you're on your feet, you're working in teams, you're interacting. That creates more energy in the room. It also creates a much better learning experience. And I do something that most trainers don't do, which is a week after the training, I have a little bonus session with everybody over Zoom and say, okay, in between, you have to send me your top 3 action points. What are you going to do going forward? And in that bonus accountability session, I'll say, okay, what's working well for you? And they'll tell me. And I'll say, okay, what isn't working as well as it should for you? Because certain things in sales training or LinkedIn training, you embrace very quickly. But other things are a bit harder. And we work on that. And that's something I don't see any of my competition doing. That's something that just gives me that extra advantage over so many people. Is I offer accountability, but I don't charge extra for it, because for me, the accountability is just as important as the training. Because 50% of what you learn, you'll forget tomorrow. 90% of what you learn, you will forget in a week. That is just how it goes. So you need the accountability in between. I need to be speaking to the managers to say, okay, I've done my week's accountability. I recommend you hire me for more. But if you don't, you got to keep the team accountable yourself every week. Otherwise, they're going to forget all about this and your money will have been wasted. And that is why people keep learning and doing better with me, because I implement the accountability and I work with the managers to make sure it continues when I'm not there.
I love it, and you actually have a framework, but it's customized, right? You identify the problem, you interact and train on it, and then you do the follow-up and feedback to create accountability. I love it, dude. It's interesting, Niraj, because, you and I are very similar in our psychology and our methodology. I don't like to assume that I know the problem. I like to dig in, because a lot of times what companies think is the problem is really only a symptom of the problem. And if you just stick to, a framework, one size fits all, it's almost like sales malpractice, right? Because you're just superficially working on something that is not really the problem. Tell me about some of the results you've created for companies having went through your training.
I worked with a local warehouse recently, and they do all kinds of hardware. I don't mean hardware software. I mean like hammers, nails, screw fixes, things I know nothing about. I have to hire people to do that for me in the house. So I had to spend a bit of time learning about it. And they wouldn't pick up the phone. They were all young people in their 20s. And I said, okay, we got to do 2 things here. First of all, this is an all male office. You got to get a female on board to make it more interesting, to bring a different perspective, a different attitude. And second of all, we got to do role plays. So after I train them, I say, okay, here's my mobile. I'm here, they're here. Call my number, and cold call to me. And by the way, this is going to be one of the worst experiences of your life. Everybody just bursts out laughing, because it is horrible doing a role play in front of your colleagues. But every single person has to do that with me, whether they like it or not. And they hate it. And I say, by the way, there's going to be a prize for the winner, and it'll be alcohol related. So the winner always gets a 6-pack of beer or a really nice bottle of wine. And so everybody's competing, and you have to make it fun, because so much sales training is boring. So because it's so interactive and it's so fun, all of a sudden the company are booking 4 times as many meetings as just through spam and through email, and going, hi, I hope you're well. Are you interested in any kind of hardware? It doesn't work that way. But now we've practiced and practiced and practiced, and they have some confidence, and they're booking 4 times as many meetings, which is leading to 5 times more revenue. Those are results that make me so happy. And again, one thing I do, My competition don't do that much is LinkedIn recommendations. I've got 123, I think, already, because I say to them, what was the experience like working with me? Did I over deliver to you? Did I keep my promises? Are your team energized? They are. Oh, wonderful. But look, I'm sure you know recommendations really matter to businesses. Would it be okay if I just sent what you said to me as a LinkedIn recommendation to approve? I do that all the time, because when people are looking to do business with you, one of the first things they do is they check your recommendations and they check what people have said about you. Not, Niraj is a nice guy, he did well for us. No, people want to know a bit more than that. And that's what I give them that most people just don't do.
Yeah, and I love that you walk them through it, because there's only one way to get better, and that's practice. Like, my boy is in Montessori school. I'm a late bloomer. He's 6 years old, but everything I want to be experiential for him, like curriculums and stuff like that. I want him to open his mind and use his creativity. Because for me, like Jeffrey Gitomer says, one of the greatest strengths is creativity in sales, right? And finding a way to solve a problem. What do you think is the biggest turnoff right now of salespeople or organizations on LinkedIn?
It's hard to find one problem, but the biggest problem I see is that I don't see any self-awareness, John. I see people just going straight in there and thinking, well, sales is easy. Most people are terrible at it. I'll just do some kind of generic copy and paste message and just spam as many people as I can. And a lot of people just have zero self-awareness. That's a major problem. The other problem is a lot of people are getting bad advice from their bosses. So a lot of bosses who are managers have never been trained as managers. As a result, they don't know how to coach people to success. And you'll always become more successful in business when you can get your teams or your staff to perform better. That's just how good business works. But most managers have no idea how to train teams. So what they do is they hide in their offices, or the teams are on the floor selling, or they're away in meetings, or the teams on the floor selling. But the really good ones, they're in the thick of it. They're there supporting their team or getting on the phone with them. And I don't see that with many managers. I see them hiding or in meetings or saying they're too busy. And that really has to stop. And managers will appreciate their staff way more when they get involved in the selling and see how difficult it is. Because some days it is brutal. It really is.
Yeah, I started my career going door to door. I mean, I literally started selling when I was a boy. I wanted clothes. I wanted new school clothes. So paper boy, mowing lawns, pulling weeds, painting fences. I'd do anything for you if you'd give me $5, right? But early in my career, we were just hustling, doing FMCG, fast moving consumer goods, right? Literally, we would sell briefcases, we'd sell watches, and I would run all day, and hit like 200 doors, like, and there's a lot of no's, which, you learn it's just the next opportunity. Keep on going. But the interactions are priceless, because you learn how to handle objections. You learn how to turn over objections. You learn how to handle psychos, like literally freaks, right? And especially in America, dude, people are rude. I had a crackhead come out with a butcher knife and he wanted to steal my shit. And I was like, oh my God, I can't let you have my stuff. And he's like, you're going to give it to me or I'm going to stick you. The more I thought about it, I'm like, man, this guy could get lucky, and stab me in the neck. It was horrible, dude. But learning from being in the heat, right? In America, there's a saying, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? And that comes from literally working in like dinner houses or Gordon Ramsay type stuff. And I think he's a pussycat compared to the trainer I had. The trainer I had was on methamphetamines, all jacked up, and a fucking psycho yelling and screaming at me while I was trying to do 1,000 breakfasts, right? Too funny. So love what you do and how you do it. Tell me about your most memorable sales interaction that you've had in sales, because I see it as wins. And I don't see winning as, for me to win, someone else has to lose, because sales are something I do for people, not to them. But I stack wins when I make a sale, because that means I made a difference. That's why I stack the wins. And for me, having won, like one of my biggest contracts, I increased a lady's company, Dory Makadungdung. You try to say it. Yeah. But she's doing 20 million US in sales a year. And I went in and worked with her 14 salespeople, and literally just role played, drove it home. And we increased her sales by $5 million in less than a year. Like, bang. And she absolutely loves me, right? She made an extra $1 million. So that's like a big win I'm talking about. That's a win for me. Did I get paid a lot of money? Yeah, I did. But she made $1 million, man. Can you tell me a story like that?
I got a story that's going to be very relevant to salespeople. So when I became a manager, a sales manager for the first time, we had a client, one of the biggest shipping companies in the world, called Maersk, which everybody knows in shipping, big company, and they weren't doing business with us. And every time I tried to call the guy in charge, he was never available. Just wouldn't take phone calls, wouldn't reply to emails. I'm like, okay, what do I do here? Nobody in the past can get hold of him. Now I can't get hold of him. And I found out he was at an event in Rotterdam. I said to my boss, I have to get to Rotterdam. He goes, that's a brilliant idea. I love your attitude. Get out there. So I flew, took the whole, it takes time to get to the airport, to get through customs, to fly. You're losing over half a day to get there. And I shook his hand. I looked him in the eye and I said, I've just flown over from London to meet you, because I want to know why we aren't doing business together, and what we did wrong, what my predecessors did wrong, and what I can do right. So I made the effort. I acknowledged there was a problem in the past, and I said I want to make it right. Not I want to do business with you, not will you buy some advertising in my magazine or sponsor my conference. I want to know what I can do to make it right. A lot of people in sales don't think much about the language they use. And the language you use with people is so important. So when you speak to a CEO, you speak about profit, loss, legacy, market share. But you speak to a financial director, they just care about cutting costs. You speak to an HR director who sits on the board, what they care about is staff well-being. You have to understand the language you speak to. Most people don't do that. So I spoke the right language. I made the effort. I took full responsibility for previous behavior of people. And I said, I want to know how I can make this right. And he talked and I listened. I didn't say, here's the solution I have. I said, I listened. And I went back. I did a proposal for him based on his needs. I sent that and he sponsored our awards. That was big money. And then at the awards, I asked him what the experience was like. Work with me. He goes, it was awesome. It was professional. You're great. I said, wonderful. Who else in your company, because Maersk are a huge company, who else in your company do you think could benefit from my services? Not who can you recommend me to so I can sell to. Who at your company do you think could benefit from my services? And Maersk had an offshoot, SAF Marine, based in Belgium. He gave me the guy's details, introduced me by email. I contacted him. He became another sponsor. Who did he recommend me to? Somebody else. I just found all the people internally who were making decisions. I went after every single one. And all of a sudden, almost 40% of their annual budget is coming to me when they have thousands of options. And that was really important to me, to be able to do that, but also set the example to my team to say, look, this is how you sell. Don't be satisfied with just talking to one person. You have to talk to so many people internally. It was a big deal. It wasn't the biggest deal I ever did, probably the third or fourth biggest, but it was the most satisfying because it was a client we had lost that I had won back. And I set the example to the team to say, this is how you do things.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you came from service, and there's a great quote out there. There's no traffic jam on the extra mile. The CEO, he gets it. He looked at your effort. Like, what was this guy willing to do to get our business? And did he go the extra mile, even to just, bridge the relationship, repair a relationship? If he's going to do this much for me, even before he's made a sale, this is a guy I want to work with. And so it really is coming from service. And, you know, you nailed it. Who else do you think would benefit from working with me in your company? So it's coming from a place of it's what's in it for them, not what's in it for you. Right. And as salespeople, I have no shame in earning and making a lot of money. I have no shame. It's okay. Right. Especially if I 10x your results. Do you think it's cool that I get 10% of that? Because if you don't, then you're the wrong guy to sell or not to sell. I don't want to sell to somebody who doesn't want to also come from giving and service, right? So that's brilliant. So what are you currently implementing right now in your prospecting approach? Because we talked about old school, right? And let's be honest. These big companies like Salesforce that you're now working with, there is a new generation of how can we make it better, faster, more efficient? There is AI. These young kids can scroll faster than a speeding bullet, right? And they, you know, like, comment, like this is just a way of life now and it's all good. But there's a difference now in the way people, how we originally used to sell. Like my prospecting was easy. It was like a pair of black Nikes. Run. I resonate with you, so I'm probably rambling, but you know, people used to ask me, how'd you make your first million? I'm like, go like this. Knock, knock. That's right. So, but the game has changed, right? People have become better, faster, more efficient. Now there's a marketing executive, there's a sales development representative. By the time salesperson gets a sales qualified lead, it goes from MQL to SQL and all this terminology. Yeah. How are you prospecting, and how much time do you think salespeople should be prospecting?
Okay. So the way I prospect, again, is a bit different. So I know that young people today are way better at technology than I will ever be, and they are way faster. But I have certain skills, like I can go to a networking event and I can talk to people. I see young people at networking events and they really struggle to hold conversations for more than a few minutes. They really do. And that's a big advantage I have. I will talk to anybody at a networking event. And I don't just go for the big players. When I go to networking events, I find the people who are by themselves and I talk to them. Because most of the time I found out they're just a bit shy or a bit awkward. And quite often they're a decision maker. They just don't know how to approach other people. And the amount of business I've won just by talking to strangers at conferences and networking events is incredible. So again, having social skills matters. The second thing is when I connect with somebody on LinkedIn, I don't send them a generic message. I send them a video or I send them a voice note. And again, most young people are so comfortable on TikTok and Instagram, yet they will not pick up a phone, John, like this and send a prospecting video to somebody. It's incredible. They just won't do it. And I will. So that's how I prospect. Again, it's memorable. It stands out in a sea of people who all sound the same. And that's huge.
There's so many different templates out there that are used, right? Like literally in my LinkedIn inbox, I literally probably get 50 to 100 DMs a day of people selling, and the scripts are almost all identical.
Yeah, they are. It's shockingly bad.
And there's a great book out there. It's called Giftology. Have you heard of it?
I haven't. Who's that by?
I don't remember the author's name, but it's all about giving and standing out. And I'm a big fan. Giftology, you should grab it. It's priceless. And how to customize gifts for your audience. Meaning, just like what G2 did with sending out those big awards, right? And what Russell Brunson does with the 2 Comma Club. Have you heard of Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels?
I've got .com secrets there, yeah.
Yeah, and now there's organizations out there that are actually doing conferences of rewarding recognized leaders and asking them to come and speak. But the whole thing is It's really just a lead magnet to get them all in the room so that there's a pitch fest, right? People want rewards, recognition, competition, and compensation. That's what drives even salespeople, right? That's why I built the sales machine. I built the sales machine as a software, sales performance software, but to automate it. So like you can set and forget because it'll notify you, Niraj. It'll say, hey, these guys did this, these guys did that, these guys achieved this, they achieved that. And it'll also notify you, hey, these guys need help. They're not doing very well. So I love automation. I love giftology and doing something. So like I was selling car care as an example, and none of my key account managers or my AEs, whatever you want to call them, could get in the door. Oh, people don't want to talk to us. Oh, people don't want to talk to us. So I used that idea from giftology, right? And I made these big car care baskets, like with, car wax, microfibers, sponges, and I did them all up and cellophane wrapped those puppies while everybody else was pitching them 50 to 100 things a day, and their desk is stacked. Here comes this big ass gift basket. Dude, I converted all the malls. It was tough in the beginning, right? But as soon as I got one, I got three, I got five, and eventually I was in all the major shopping malls throughout the entire Philippines and Indonesia, and changed the game of the industry, literally, through just standing out, right? So I believe in prospecting and refining your skills. And for me, 50% of the sales is made before you even have a conversation. So like what you were saying earlier, you go on their LinkedIn, you find out who they are, what they're about, what they're doing, what's happening in their industry. You cross-pollinate all of that stuff. So when you do jump on a call, you're informed. You already know about them. So what can people do differently, especially with automation? You talk about young people, and we have AI. How are you interjecting that? And what do you think companies can do differently so that they can scale their business and their sales?
I don't teach automation. However, I do know that personalization at scale is a huge deal. Because a number of people who, you told me you get 50 to 100 DMs a day. Altogether, I get about 50 DMs and about 100 emails a day from people with almost identical templates. And I look at them, and maybe one person a month, maybe two people a month, it's personalized. Niraj, I was on your LinkedIn profile. I noticed this post you did. Or congratulations on your book, Everybody Works at Sales. I see you have over 60 reviews. That's incredible. That to me is personalization, but people rarely do that. When you just send out automated copy and paste, nobody cares. But if you can personalize that post and say something about somebody, that is going to make the difference. So personalization, I know in 2024 is going to be a huge deal, but I still see very few people doing that, John. Really, very few people.
Yeah, and you've got 32,000 followers, right? Like that's a big deal. If you guys want to learn from somebody, you got to learn from somebody who has already shown the results. So like I look at, I get proposals all the time, and then I'm like, truth be told, I have someone filter this all for me because I don't waste my time on, 50 pitches a day, but I let them vest, and my vest, the way I vest is go check them out. And, if we get an offer and the guy's got like 300 followers on LinkedIn and he's selling me LinkedIn services, I think that that's a red flag. How about you?
One thing I would like to see more people do is find people more successful than them and learn from them and ask them questions. I'm always surprised how few people ask me questions. They always ask me for favors, but very few ask me questions. People rarely say to me, how do I become better? Very rarely, which disappoints me, because if he did, I'd probably give you an answer, But they say, oh, can you give me half an hour of your time free? And I say, okay, send me an agenda and give me a reason why. So if 10 people ask me for free calls a day, and I say, sure, send me an agenda and tell me why, 1 out of 10 will reply, because they're too lazy to even send me an agenda. I find that incredible. And I'm always saying, find people more successful than you and learn from them. And if they don't give you their time, ask how much will it cost to hire you, and then you'll find their attitude will very quickly change, because that's what you do. You surround yourself with successful people. Most people in sales don't really mix with people outside their environment. So you look at the guests in your show. There's John Barrows, who I'm in awe of and I've spoken on sales panels with. There's Richard Harris, who's a good friend of mine over the years. Marcus Chan, whose book I supported last year. I got nothing from it. I wanted to support him as a professional. I read an advanced copy of his book. I promoted it for him. I asked for nothing in return. But I have mutual respect now with him, because he sees me as an equal to him. This is how you build relationships. I don't see many people in sales thinking on that level about how can I associate with people better than me and support them and learn from them. And it's a really good habit to have. There's so many skills I wish people would do that I just don't see them doing enough of,
Yeah. And, I want to thank you for your time, Niraj, because I've had those brilliant minds on my show, and we really do like to filter through the different individuals we bring on here, because we want people who come from service. And I see that you, Marcus, John Brown, it's just, you guys ooze positivity and service. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because I know it can make a huge difference to companies out there. And I'm grateful. I've learned a lot today. I'm always open to learning. So thank you for that. What is the greatest thing that you've ever learned about sales?
You're going to be very surprised by the answer. But the greatest thing you can learn about sales, apart from the obvious, which is sales as service, that's too obvious. But you have to work on yourself first. Because if you don't work on yourself, it doesn't matter how much you learn, you're not going to be of much use to anybody else. So focus on your mindset, focus on your emotional intelligence, focus on your well-being, focus on your physical health, focus on your mental health. Because once you get that right, it's so much easier to help other people.
I had a partner, he's Indian, and I call him Joy Boy. Vikas Malkani, he owns Soul Center. We did seminars together. We called them Wealth, Wisdom, and Winning. We help CEOs grow and stuff. Your energy reminds me of him, just a joy boy, right? And the dude's like 60-some, and I'm like, dude, you look younger than me, and you're fucking happy all the time. And he goes, because I'm happy, man. And I'm like, I love it, dude. Love you, Niraj. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to work with Niraj, you got to connect with him on LinkedIn, Niraj Kapur. He's got over 32,000 followers. He's helped over 500 companies all over the world, and he can help you as well. Where else can they find you or your book?
The books are all on Amazon. And you can go to nirajkapur.com, NIRAJKAPUR.com.
You're a legend, Niraj, and I look forward to collaborating and even doing this again soon. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, John. Take good care.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to send a review about what you liked on this podcast or share it with somebody who would need it to definitely improve their business, building and scaling sales teams, do me a favor, like, share. It means a lot to me so that we can help others grow and live in abundance. That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And if you got value from this episode, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and refer a friend. And if you want even more value, go to thesalesmachine.com, click on resources, and there's tons of resources there to increase profits and drive performance in your business. Right on, come on.